Am I the antagonist for asking my dad to think of our grief of our mom when planning his wedding to new fiancé? 2 years ago, my mother passed away from cancer. She was relatively young, in her late 50s. My parents had a happy marriage, so her loss was incredibly difficult for all of us. Less than a year later, my father met a new woman, and within a few months, they were engaged. Their engagement was short, about 8-9 months from when they got engaged until the actual wedding. I understand that some people, especially widowed men based on what others have told me, find new partners quickly and may even remarry within a year. So I'm trying not to be naive about it. For my siblings and me, the situation is a bit strange because we are still mourning our mother's death. Additionally, the new fiancé is only a few years older than my sister and me, who are the older ones among us. Despite this, we have tried our best to be happy for our father and welcoming to her while dealing with our own grief. However, my issue is that my father is so wrapped up in his new fiancé that he seems to have forgotten that we are still grieving. For example, on the 2-year anniversary of our mother's death, 3 of us received the wedding invitation in the mail, while the others received it the day after. It hurt all of us that they didn't consider this date before sending the invites, but I decided not to confront them about it because I didn't want to dampen their joy. My father randomly messaged my grandmother, my mother's mother, after not having any contact since the funeral. She was with me at the time, and he asked for her address to send her an invite the day after the anniversary. He didn't ask how she was doing, or how she was coping with the loss of her daughter, or even if she would be okay with attending the wedding. He just informed her that she was invited and requested her address. My dear grandmother said she would attend for our sake, but my grandfather adamantly refused due to his strong emotions. A month later, my sisters and I were added to the WhatsApp group for the bachelorette party, where the fiancé's friends were enthusiastically chatting and planning the event. For us, this added another layer of heartache, as we were only in this position because our mother passed away relatively recently. This is where I started wondering if I am in the wrong. I messaged my father to express that I am happy for him, but I feel like they haven't considered our grief. I mentioned that I would have preferred to be asked before being added to the bachelorette group. Most importantly, I wanted them to remember important dates, such as the anniversary, and avoid sending wedding invites in the days or week leading up to it. His response was apologizing for not being thoughtful enough and promising to check with me beforehand. But he didn't acknowledge that it might have been insensitive to send wedding invites to his children just before the anniversary. I made it clear that I don't expect him to consult me for every decision, but I want him to remember that we are grieving. However, he shifted the blame to the postal service, saying it wasn't their fault that the invite arrived on the day. Now, it seems like he is avoiding me, so I'm wondering if I am the one at fault for dampening their wedding planning by highlighting our grief. It is completely understandable that you and your siblings are still processing the death of your mother and that you are feeling hurt by your father's actions. It is also natural for your father to want to move on and find happiness again. However, it is important for both parties to be considerate of each other's feelings. It was fair for you to express your feelings to your father, letting him know that you felt excluded and that you would have appreciated more thoughtfulness during a difficult time. It is natural to want your grief to be acknowledged and respected. Your father's response may not have been ideal, but it's possible that he didn't fully understand the impact of his actions. Moving forward, it might be helpful to have an open and calm conversation with your father, expressing your feelings and discussing ways to navigate these sensitive situations in the future. Communication and understanding are key in resolving conflicts and finding a way for both parties to grieve and celebrate at the same time. My husband is still refusing vasectomy. I'm at my wits' end. I always knew that pregnancy was something I would have to endure rather than enjoy, and unfortunately, my experience proved that right. I was fortunate to have 2 healthy babies, although my pregnancies were difficult and somewhat traumatic, as were my labors. Additionally, I have a wonderful stepchild who is currently ages 1, 3, and 10. Over the course of 15 years with a menstrual cycle, I have gone through numerous blood draws, IV infusions, epidurals, and trials of various birth control options. It became exhausting to bear the sole responsibility of preventing pregnancy, enduring the physical toll and constant changes to my body, while my partner faced no consequences. After my last birth control implant led to constant bleeding and arm pain, I decided I had had enough. It was his turn to take responsibility, whether through condoms or getting a vasectomy. However, this resolve only lasted about 2 months before I was guilt-tripped. My 35-year-old partner complained that it would not feel the same, expressed fear of surgery, and questioned why I couldn't undergo the female equivalent, in addition to promising to withdraw. We had unprotected intercourse once, 6 days before my ovulation, as he forgot in the moment, and unsurprisingly, I became pregnant. I went through a complete breakdown and experienced a panic attack. This unsettled him, and he apologized profusely, promising to get a vasectomy as soon as possible. I had to carry the mental burden of deciding and going through with an abortion, but I ended up miscarrying the day before it was scheduled, which brought its own emotional turmoil. 7 months have passed since then, and there has been no vasectomy, no plan, and no thought unless I bring it up. Every time I finish my period, he jokes about how he can't wait until tonight, and that it's his chance to unload because it will be safe to do so. Today, within 5 minutes of being home, he made this remark, and I completely lost it. I screamed at him, questioning how he could do this to me. We had state insurance until the beginning of the month, which would have covered the cost entirely, but now we have inadequate insurance with co-pays and only 80% coverage. Every time I address the issue, he whines about not knowing how to proceed. I am not his mother, yet he expects me to find a doctor for him and schedule his appointments. Did he ever do this for me during any of my pregnancies, abortion, or even for our own children? He acts as if putting off our reproductive health is acceptable because he finally decided to go to the dentist after 8 years of neglect. He constantly brings up sex and engages in arguments about condoms. He apologized and actually conducted some research. He left me alone with the kids for approximately 4 minutes before returning and attempting to engage me in random conversation, asking for a hug, and expecting me to accept his apology. When I refused and ignored him while on my phone, he tried to gaslight me, claiming he hates when I act this way and that I never show interest in what he has to say. He completely attempted to shift the blame onto me, all while leaving our children unsupervised on another level. I'm exhausted by today's events and the ongoing battle regarding sex and how he treats and thinks about my body. I don't know what to do. The fact that he tried to gaslight you and turn the situation around on you when you expressed your frustrations is also not acceptable. It's important to be able to have open and honest conversations about difficult topics without one partner trying to manipulate or invalidate the other's feelings. Ultimately, it sounds like you need to have a serious and honest conversation with your partner about your concerns and the impact his actions, or lack thereof, are having on your mental and emotional health. It's important for him to understand the toll this is taking on you and for him to make a genuine effort to address these issues. If he continues to neglect your concerns or refuses to take responsibility, it may be worth considering seeking outside help, such as couples therapy, to work through these challenges together. Remember, your feelings and well-being matter too, and it's important to advocate for yourself and your relationship. I was offered a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. My wife won't even talk to me about it. Here's some background. My wife and I met in high school and got married just before I left the Marine Corps in 2011. We have always worked together towards our goals. We didn't want to have kids until we had health insurance and stable jobs that would allow my wife to stay at home. We worked hard, achieved our goals, had kids, bought a house, and now my wife is a stay-at-home mom who homeschools. I am proud to be able to provide this level of comfort for my family. As a commercial driver, I am usually home 2 to 3 nights a week, and I make a salary of $92K a year. Not bad at all. Recently, my dad, who owns a successful trucking company doing dirt work about 4 hours away from me, found out he's sick and wants to retire. He offered me a salary of $100K a year, ownership of the business in 5 years, and a rental property where we wouldn't have to pay rent. So basically it's a pay raise, free housing, and a free business in 5 years. The only catch is that we would have to move from a town with 100,000 people to a town with only 5,000 people, and the nearest Walmart would be 2 hours away. My wife immediately said no. She didn't even want to discuss or have a conversation about it. She said she is perfectly happy where we are and it doesn't make sense for us to move. I was surprised and a bit angry about her response because that's not how we usually make decisions. Now I'm not sure what to do. My initial reaction, mostly driven by anger, is to say too bad. This is what's best for us, but I don't want to be that kind of person. While we both fulfill traditional marital roles and we are Christians, the idea of telling my wife to submit to me doesn't sit well with me. How do you handle life-changing decisions when both partners firmly disagree? TL Doctor. I want to move 4 hours away for a once-in-a-lifetime career opportunity, but my wife doesn't want to. What should I do? Edit 1. Just to clarify, the main benefit for me is not the money, but being able to be home with my family every night. Small-town living is not an issue based on our previous conversations. Edit 2. To further clarify, people seem to be focusing on the structure of our relationship. Despite assumptions, we actually have a very healthy relationship. This is the first conflict where communication has been completely cut off. My goal here is to gain insight and perspective on my wife's point of view so I can better understand where she's coming from. I have already received a lot of helpful information, and I appreciate those who have provided it. Instead of dismissing your wife's concerns or trying to force her to submit to your decision, which you already mentioned makes you uncomfortable, try to have a calm and respectful conversation about the potential move. Ask her to explain her reasons for not wanting to move and truly listen to her perspective. Consider discussing the pros and cons of the move together, taking into account both of your needs and desires. It's possible that your wife has valid concerns that you haven't fully understood yet. Together, try to find common ground or potential compromises that could address these concerns. Remember, a successful marriage is built on mutual respect and compromise. It's important to approach this issue as a team, finding a solution that takes both of your perspectives and desires into account. Keep the lines of communication open, and don't be afraid to seek professional counseling if needed to help facilitate the discussion and find a resolution that works for both of you. Am I the antagonist for refusing to apologize for snapping back at my friend's sister? I have a friend named Beth, 34 years old, who has an older sister named Jill, 38 years old, who has always disliked me from the moment we met. Jill would often call me names like weirdo freak and blame me for the bullying I experienced in school, claiming that I deserved it because I was a dork. Due to Jill's hostility, I stopped visiting Beth's house. However, our paths crossed again at Beth's 18th birthday party, where Jill falsely accused me of harassing her boyfriend just because I greeted him. She insulted me, calling me ugly and strange, but fortunately, Jill eventually moved away, and I was relieved to be rid of her. Now, Beth and I planned a dinner reservation with our group of friends, including Liz, 33 years old, Kelly, 34 years old, and Megan, 34 years old. This was our first opportunity to meet up in over 2 years due to various reasons, so we were all excited to catch up. Since neither Kelly nor I can drive, Beth kindly offered to pick us up with her car and take us to the restaurant. However, when we arrived at Beth's flat by bus, Jill answered the door, which surprised both Kelly and me. Beth had failed to mention that Jill was visiting, and it would have been helpful to know since both Kelly and I have had negative experiences with Jill in the past. Nevertheless, we remained polite. Kelly greeted Jill and complimented her dress, and I simply said, "Hi Jill, it's nice to see you. How have you been?" Unfortunately, Jill completely ignored Kelly and instead turned her attention to me, saying, "Clearly better than you. Still a pale freak, huh?" I couldn't hold back and responded by telling her, "At least I'm not a bitter hag holding on to grudges against a 12-year-old. Maybe it's time for you to grow up a bit." Immediately, Jill ran off to complain to Beth, insisting that she wouldn't take us anywhere until I apologize. Kelly and I were confused because we didn't understand why Jill would be responsible for driving us in the first place. That's when Beth appeared and revealed that her car was broken, and Jill was supposed to be our driver. Beth scolded me for being cruel to her sister, claiming that it's just Jill's sense of humor. Kelly called out the nonsense and described Jill as a bully, expressing surprise that I hadn't snapped at her years ago. Kelly also warned me not to apologize. I agreed with Kelly and had no intentions of apologizing. In response, Beth declared, "Well, then you'll have to find your own way to the restaurant," and promptly kicked us out. Both Kelly and I contacted Liz and Megan to explain the situation and let them know that we would be arriving late since we now had to pay for a taxi. Liz believed that I should just apologize to ease the tension between Beth and me, considering that Beth was siding with Jill. On the other hand, Megan felt that this confrontation was long overdue, and Jill deserved the consequences of her actions. In the end, I stood my ground and refused to apologize. Kelly and I took a taxi, only to discover that Beth refused to join us because of what I had said to Jill. It has been a week since these events occurred, and Beth is now ignoring all of us except for Liz, who told her that I was at fault and demanded an apology from me. Am I the asshole in this situation? Jill has been consistently disrespectful and cruel towards you for years. It's completely understandable that you reached your breaking point and snapped back at her. You have no obligation to apologize for defending yourself against her bullying. Beth's reaction is disappointing, as she should have known about the history between you and Jill and protected you from her sister's toxicity. It seems like Beth is enabling Jill's behavior and prioritizing her sister over your feelings. Apologizing in this situation would only enable Jill's continued mistreatment of you and send the message that it's acceptable for her to behave that way. You deserve better friends who will stand up for you and support you unconditionally. Am I the antagonist for telling someone their kid will leave them? My mom has a friend and they have a 13-year-old girl, let's call her Jane, who looks up to me. We're both the eldest girls in immigrant families. Recently, Jane and her mom have been fighting. Her mom says Jane is always on her phone, her grades are falling, and she isn't doing as well as she should be. Jane comes to me crying, stressed about the pressure her mom is putting on her. Everyone in her household sides with her mom, and she's never felt more isolated from her own family. I told Jane that communication is important, where both sides are heard. Jane tells me that when they talk, her mom talks over her, and Jane starts crying so much she can't get a word out. Her mom wants the best for her, including good grades to get scholarships for good colleges. However, Jane tells me this pressure is too much, and no matter what, they can't have a proper conversation because it's always her mom taking control, just as how she does with everything. So with Jane's permission, I talk to her mom for her. Me. Jane feels like there's a lot of pressure on her, too much. She feels almost unsafe talking to you because she's scared of you. She feels like everything she's doing is for you, not for her. The first thought on her mind when she gets a test result is, I hope mom is happy about this, not I'm proud of myself. She says she never feels proud because it feels like you're just constantly raising the bar for her. It's unrealistic, and you need to remember she's just a kid. Jane's mom, I worked hard to build this life for her, and it would be wasteful if she spent it all on her phone. If I didn't encourage her to do well, she would do worse. It's simple. I pay for extra tutoring, buy all the supplies she wants and needs, and I make sure she's rested enough to study well. I want her to live a good life, and that starts with good education. I don't expect you to understand it yet anyway. You're young and not a mother yet. You have no right to tell me how to raise my kid, so keep yourself out of my family's business. You don't live in our house, so how would you know the real story and not the fabricated one she told you? If she has a problem, she needs to learn how to talk to me about it. She has no reason to be scared, and at her age, I'm sure she's saying that for attention or to be dramatic. Me, I think this way of thinking is more harmful than not, but I understand I'm not in your family. However, just letting you know, Jane has been crying for weeks about this, and this way of treating your kid is going to end up in her leaving you after she's 18 with no look back. Believe me or don't, but I know exactly what's going through her mind, and if you keep up this treatment, she's going to grow up loving you because you're her mother, but resenting you because you selfishly prioritized your own love as a mother before her as a person. Now, I realize how harsh my last words were. Was I in the wrong here? You are definitely not the asshole in this situation. You showed genuine concern for Jane and tried to mediate the communication between her and her mom. It is clear that Jane's mom's approach to parenting is causing distress and isolation for Jane. Your attempt to convey Jane's feelings and perspective was done with good intentions. Jane's mom's response was dismissive and defensive. While she believes she is doing what is best for her daughter, it is important to consider the impact it is having on Jane's mental well-being. Your words in the conversation were justified and necessary to make her understand the potential consequences of her actions. It is unfortunate that Jane's mom refuses to acknowledge the importance of mental health and dismisses it as mere emotions to get over. This only adds to the need for outside intervention or support for Jane. Overall, you did what you felt was necessary to advocate for Jane's well-being. You showed empathy and stood up for her when she was unable to express her feelings effectively. That makes you a caring and supportive friend. Am I the antagonist for telling my mother-in-law to stay out of things that don't concern her? My husband and I took a break from his mom last year because she was meddling in my personal matters that didn't affect her. Here's what happened. I was contacted by some relatives from my biological family, my late father's parents and 2 of his siblings. They reached out to express regret for allowing my younger sister and me to be placed in foster care at ages 6 and 2 after our parents passed away. Unfortunately, my sister passed away in foster care, leaving me without any family. Naturally, this angered me since I hadn't seen these relatives in over 2 decades, and now they suddenly wanted to reconnect with me at 29. The reason they didn't take me in was because I was the result of an affair between my father and my mother. He was already married with kids when he began the affair, and his marriage ended when my mother was 6 months pregnant with me. As a consequence, both my father and I were resented by his ex-wife and children. I barely remember my half-siblings, and my memories of them aren't pleasant. When my parents died, my father's parents and siblings sided with his ex-wife and children, deciding that foster care was the best option since we had no family on our mother's side. My mother herself grew up in foster care. I saw my grandparents, aunts, and uncles at my sister's funeral, but since none of them claimed her body and I was just a child at the time, she was buried by the state. I had no desire to welcome them back into my life or forgive them and build a relationship. My mother-in-law started urging me to give them a chance or else I'd regret it. She questioned how I could ever know my siblings if I didn't make an effort. My husband intervened and asked her to stop. I even explained that my siblings weren't the ones reaching out, and from what little information I had, they didn't seem interested in establishing a connection with me. It seemed like they believed I should have died with my sister. However, my mother-in-law didn't back down, and she wanted to know their names so she could talk to them. Despite my husband repeatedly telling her to leave it alone, she persisted. That's when we decided to take a break from her. Then, about a week ago, she showed up, claiming she found them on Facebook and was waiting for them to accept her message so she could intervene and fix things for me. I lost my temper and told her to stop meddling in matters that don't concern her. She scolded me for cursing and insisted she was trying to help. When my husband returned home, he was furious with his mother. They argued, and then his brother got involved, suggesting that I should have simply shut the door in her face and let my husband handle her. Now I'm questioning if they're right, and if I was wrong to engage and say what I did. Am I the asshole? It is completely understandable that you would not want to welcome these relatives into your life given your history with them and the pain they caused you and your sister. Your mother-in-law should respect your decision and boundaries instead of trying to force a relationship with people who have shown no interest in having one with you. It was not wrong for you to stand up for yourself and express your frustration with her meddling. Your husband's brother is also incorrect in suggesting that you should have shut the door in her face. You have the right to speak up for yourself and set boundaries in your own home. It is important for your husband to support and defend you in situations like this. Thanks for watching. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications so you never miss a video. To finish listening to all the stories, check out the playlist in the description.